Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Urban Outcast. I'm your host, the Outcast, Mark Urban. As I continue talking to interesting people in Whatcom County, today I have with me somebody who is actually involved in the local school boards, which is very important. This is something I've been wanting to talk to somebody about for a long time because there's lots going on in our schools these days. And one of the biggest issues, especially with sports and competition, is transgender or males competing in female sports. I have somebody here today who has kind of dealt with that and touched on it a bit in her experience on the Lynden School Board. So today I'm glad to have with me and welcome to the show, Kush, Brar. Kush, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Mark. I'm good. How about yourself?
Oh, doing pretty good. Just going down the list of things that people are sending me that, hey, you should have a podcast on this. So,
Right. Probably a long list.
Well, yeah, it's endless. I mean, there's endless content, but so tell me a little bit about, you are involved in the local school board here in Lynden, and which, by the way, God bless you. I think that a lot of us, we talk about things, but we don't actually get involved. And you actually are involved, so you kind of know what's going on. And one of the big things is this issue with the transgender or males who identify as females that are biologically male competing in women's sports. And there's a lot of detrimental residual effects from this. And obviously, because you're dealing with somebody who, hormonally, structurally is a man,
Right.
a boy.
Right.
And I hear it all the time. It's logically and clearly simply not fair.
No.
But yet it's being accepted and pushed by, I understand, obviously the state and those behind that worldview and lifestyle. So what are some of the things that you've experienced that are going on in the school right now? I know last year there was a transgender student that ran track against the girls in Lynden, and there was a little bit of fallout from that. But is there anything being done? And if so, what?
So I would start with that the law for non-discrimination in our schools has included gender identity as a protected class since 2007.
Since 2007?
2007.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yes, so that's the state law. Me neither. I was, not as involved in what was happening around the world until, my kiddos came to that age of, okay, now they're ready for school. So that's when I started to dig into all of this stuff. That's when I started attending school board meetings since COVID in 2020. And that's when I started to get, really involved in the details around this. So this law, non-discrimination in schools, has gender identity and gender expression as a protected class. And the interpretation of that law by WIAA, which is the Washington Interscholastic Athletic Association, they have interpreted that to be, as their policy says, in gender identity participation policy, it basically says that a student can compete in the gender that they identify with.
And this has been around since 2007.
Right.
Okay. Interesting. Because it's interesting that it's been that long ago since this whole explosion of the gender identity thing has really been in the last 4 years.
Right. It has exaggerated definitely in the past 4 or 5 years. Now, to your question of basically what is being done, I would answer that in what is not being done.
Right.
So we've been silent for that long. The school boards, have a broad discretionary authority and power, which wasn't used back then, to kind of, deal with some of the things that were coming into the school. And now here we are, where it's embedded into literally every policy, and now we're like, where it's too much to deal with right now. So what should have been done wasn't done back then. And that is that we should have spoken out against the violation of Title IX back then, right?
And can you do the audience a favor? Because I'm sure there's some that do not know. Can you break down, to best your ability, what exactly is Title IX?
Title IX is a federal law that was enacted back in 1972 that gave women a equal right in educational opportunities, specifically sports, because I would say, 50 years from now, right? They weren't allowed to play in any sports. Right.
Sure.
So that's the context of Title IX, is that there shouldn't be any discrimination on the basis of sex.
So, okay.
Which afforded equality to women.
So let me get this straight. So what that just said to me is it gave women the freedom from being discriminated on the basis of sex, but now it's also given a doorway for those who identify as women to fall under the category of that law.
So Department of Education, that's the federal agency, right, that is interpreting Title IX incorrectly. And our state, that includes OSPI, is blatantly violating Title IX by not acknowledging the context of Title IX. 1972, was transgender even a word back then? Was it even a context back then? Like, you have to realize, why was Title IX enacted? And if you look into the language of that, the context of that, right, the situation by which Title IX came into life is for and because of women.
Well, and this whole transgender
right.
identification thing is very, very new, and very rapidly being used, or almost weaponized.
There you go. That's the right word.
Briefly too, real quick, what the OSPI, what's the acronym used, and what are they?
OSPI is our state's Office of the Superintendent for Public Instruction.
Okay.
They give out guidelines, rules. They're the ones who interpret the RCWs, which is our state laws. That's our statutes.
Gotcha.
So they interpret those, the ones that are education oriented, which is Title 28A. And then they interpret those, and then they give us the guidelines on how to be in compliance with the state law for education.
And so in being in compliance, that means, is that kind of like saying, hey, the school better toe the line? Or does the school have any recourse to say, hey, we don't agree with this, or, we don't want this in our school system? I mean, is there any kind of recourse that they can kind of fight back against it? And if so, what does that look like?
Okay, currently, what's the pattern or the norm for our state legislature is that they tell OSPI, they give OSPI the authority to withhold funds if the school districts are not in compliance.
Of course.
Right.
Always about the money.
Right.
So let's talk about what is the recourse then that the school has? What are the legal means? What's written? What is available to them? The process that they can go through, if any, to mitigate this.
We can go to our federal court. We can go to our, if it doesn't, I know we have liberal circuit here, the Ninth Circuit, very liberal, and it may not provide us with decisions that would be in our favor. But, if that's something, we have 295 school districts in the state. And if each of those districts, or maybe even, more than half of those, say that we are being forced by our own state to violate federal law, because we all take federal money. Most of these school districts will. They can't survive, obviously, without those funds. So
if they're afraid of losing federal funds by going against the grain of what the state's laid out, so to speak.
that's state funds. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we get two funding. We get state funding and we get federal
Okay.
funding. And we need to be following state laws and federal laws. So now the question comes in is like, do federal laws supersede our state laws when they are in conflict with each other? They do.
Technically, they do. Yeah.
Right. But then nobody's following that.
Well,
But
no,
then
we have the same
yeah.
thing with the immigration laws. We have sanctuary city policies in
Right.
just about every liberal city in Washington
Right.
state that goes against federal law.
Yep.
Where, they don't report to ICE. They don't require a driver's license. They don't require anything.
Right.
It's like don't ask, don't tell all over again, except
Right.
for immigrants.
Right.
And that kind of ties into what you're saying
Yeah.
as well.
Is our own state, is these agencies that are supposed to be making sure that we are in compliance, right, with not only just state laws, but also our federal laws that our state laws are in conflict with. They're the ones who are telling us to, no, it's okay. You can violate as long as this is not something in our agenda.
What you mean by that is it's stated in there legally that it's you can violate it.
No.
You can't.
No, it's these agencies.
Oh, the
that
agencies are
enforce.
saying. I get what
Yeah,
you're saying.
yeah.
Okay,
They're
the
not
agencies are
enforcing
saying
it.
you don't have to obey federal law.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right. Well, of
Yeah.
course it
Yeah,
figures.
yeah.
'Cause
Yeah,
there's an
that you can-
agenda.
Yep, that you can ignore it. And it's, the courts that we have in our circuit, it's these state courts that we have, they have that responsibility to make sure that we're not going against our U.S. Constitution, our state's Constitution, right? Federal law, and then comes state law. It's the same agencies that
right.
tell, because there is like an unspoken agenda where
So where does the school fall into this then, as far as the school board, the superintendent, and what are some of the opinions on that, as far as they don't want to rock the boat, they don't want a lawsuit, they don't want to be on the radar, but then how do you deal, even though, if I'm understanding you correctly, it says in there that we can appeal this.
right.
Are they willing to do that?
So exactly the reasons that you stated are exactly the reasons why school boards
afraid
won't
to.
do it. Yes, they're afraid to. And honestly, it's not just school boards. It's everybody's afraid to.
Yeah, seems
Look
that
at,
way.
Yep. Look at our attorney general, look at OSPI. These are the same institutions that are supposed to be helping us, uphold, again, nation's constitution, our state's constitution, federal laws, and our state laws. But these are, and even courts. So these are same institutions that are supposed to be helping us be in compliance, but they're the one actually who's ignoring, what is right, what serves our children best.
Right.
That's the agenda.
What keeps the money flowing? What keeps the school funded? What keeps the state money, coming in, that kind of thing, which is
Right.
why, private schools tend to have more flexibility because they are more autonomous, although they do occasionally take state money,
Right.
which was an issue a little bit with Lynden Christian, because though they're supposed to be autonomous and a private school, during COVID, they did take some state money, which means what happens when you do that? At least that's my understanding.
It comes
Now
with
you've got to,
strings.
now you've got to toe the line. Now you're no longer autonomous. I kind of, not to get on a rabbit trail here, but this is kind of important because it all ties into everything we do in society. The churches, same thing with the 501c3 exempt status. Now they can't talk about the things the Bible tells them to talk about.
Right.
We got to walk the line very carefully on anything
Right.
that's political,
Right.
because you could lose your status.
Their status,
They could
yep.
get retribution against you, which if you're the church and you're trusting God, really trusting God, and that's what you believe in, that shouldn't matter. God doesn't care about 501c3.
Right.
He doesn't care about, he's saying, I'm your 501c3.
Right.
and my will be done, not the government's. I wish most churches around here would do that, but they don't, unfortunately. And the pastors walk right up to the line and then pull back.
Right. And the thing is, nowhere in the Constitution will you find that the church and government do not go
Right.
that hand in hand.
It's not the establishment of a theocracy. That's what it's protecting from. When they say separation of church and state,
Right.
it's separation of church and state, meaning that the state should not be run by the church.
Correct.
Doesn't mean it can't influence it,
Correct.
but it's not run by the state.
Right.
It's not freedom from, it's of. So you should have the freedom to choose whatever religion you want, whether
Right.
anyone agrees with it or not.
Right.
But that should not run the state. And well, it certainly isn't running our state. I wish it was a little more, because things would be a little different. But
Yeah.
so back to the school board, so their hands are tied basically, if I could say it, kind of out of fear.
Out of fear, yes. Our hands are tied out of fear. That's basically correct, because we do have legal recourse. We do have the means to be, presenting all of this in the court. And maybe today it's going to be one school board, tomorrow, next year it's going to be 2 or 3. But there's going to come a time, and we know that pretty soon, where all of these school boards are saying the same thing. We want our local authority with the school board. We want to be able to make those decisions for our communities. We do not want the state overreaching into the authority and discretionary powers of a local school board, which, by the way, our state constitution gives that to us. Even our state laws give that to us. But then they're blatantly being ignored and being violated by our state legislature. And this is where OSPI should be coming in and fighting for us.
It's kind of like just
rather than being a medium of the state to, control and to get what they want. You don't need school boards. If you're just going to hand down things and say, this is how it should be, I don't know why we're there and what we're there for.
right. And then you're sort of sweeping it under the rug.
Yeah.
Where no one can see it, because
Right.
we don't see it. We don't have to think about it except until it rears its ugly head at the next girls' track meet
And that's where we're at right
or
now.
basketball game.
Right.
And, we see it on the national level with, by the way, this Brittany Griner. I'm sorry, that's a man. Come on, that's a man. Has anybody done a cup check? That ain't, you heard the guy talk, or it, her, whatever. He talks like, that. I mean, that ain't no woman.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a national basketball player. I mean, people are just, are so willfully duped. They're so willfully willing to just turn the other way and go, oh, that's fine. Or it's not my problem.
Not my problem.
Until your kid gets into women's sports.
Right.
And gets the crap beat out of her in a wrestling meet or whatever.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, well, I need to do something about it. But why weren't you paying attention before? And that's my biggest, that I'm always preaching at people with these podcasts and things I do is, folks, you don't have the luxury anymore of, well, I don't know. I can't do Facebook and I don't want to watch the news because it just gives me anxiety and blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, it's now not is it going to be at your doorstep. It's at your doorstep and coming into your home, literally.
It's like, when somebody's coming to burn your house and then you compromise and say, you beg and say, maybe can you just burn the kitchen? You're stupid for even entertaining a thought like that from somebody that's coming to burn your house, and you say, maybe just burn the kitchen, not the whole house. That's stupidity, because you do know once the fire is in, you won't be able to control that. It's going to engulf everything in your house. That's exactly what's happening right now, is people are ignoring that fire that is already at their doorstep, and they're trying to compromise when there is no compromise to make.
Well, that is a perfect analogy, because you know why is not only do they ignore it, they say, well, you know what? It's just a little fire and it's only in the kitchen.
Right.
And as long as it stays in the kitchen, we'll be fine. We'll just go in the living room. That's the mentality.
And that's
until the whole house burns down and they're standing on the sidewalk going, well, how could this happen?
Right. Well, it's an element that can't be controlled. When you let it in, you have to realize and get into the practicality of, this is what I'm allowing to happen. And by the way,
but it can be controlled. That's the thing. If you get out in front of it,
right.
it can be controlled. But I think
Not when
again,
it's inside.
well, that's a good point. Yeah, once it's inside,
Yeah.
now you got a bigger problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and again, it goes back to people just, the old saying, an ostrich can bury his head in the sand, but he's still going to get eaten. Meaning, you ever see little kids? They put their hands over their eyes and they think, well, if you can't see me, I'm safe, right?
Right.
That's the
right.
mentality of a lot of people these days.
Well,
if I don't see it, I don't think about it.
Yeah, I'm going to add on to it, and I'm going to say it's the three things: this, and this.
Absolutely.
We teach our children to speak the truth. To if you see something, you say something, and you do something, right? But how come that changes when they get into the real world? Where if we're talking about faith,
Public positions.
Yeah, if we're talking about faith, is this, what Jesus would have done? Turn his face away from something that was not his problem? He wouldn't have done that.
No, especially if you liken it to the religious leaders of the day, which were basically the Jewish government. The Pharisees and the scribes were basically the Jewish government.
Mm-hmm.
And they, you want to talk about a theocracy, that's exactly why we have separation of church and state today. That's a perfect example, besides the fact that England did the same thing. But, and Jesus, man, he had some harsh words for them,
Right.
You are of your father, the devil, brood of vipers, whitewashed tombs with dead men's rotting bones. I mean, that was harsh language for the day. And that's for these religious elite leaders, which was basically the Jewish government. Well, if you think Jesus would be real pleased about our government today, I think he'd have some harsh things to say.
No.
So why wouldn't we?
And that's the truth. And truth can be harsh, truth can be bitter, but the truth sets you free. And when I'm talking about, whether or not you're able to do something, it does not mean that you stop doing it. Especially if it's for the right thing, if you're fighting for the right thing. I get that it's going to be hard on your body. It's going to be hard on your mind. It's going to be hard on your soul. And like I said, the recourse could be something that's going to set the community back a little bit, when it comes to funds or when it comes to something else. But that's the price that you pay for doing the right thing.
The right thing.
It's all about the choice. You will always have the choice. So when, I do have, other board directors, not just in Lynden, because I talk with a lot of board directors across the state. And some of them, they're going to come and say, well, I can't put at risk 500 people's employment, and I can't put at risk, our children's education. What exactly happened in COVID? When the schools shut down.
Excellent
You
point.
might have not done it, but it did happen.
Excellent
it did
point.
happen, right?
Yeah.
And they got their way. The government got their way by doing that, but then it's wrong if we do it. If we stand for the right thing, it's wrong if we do it.
Right, because you're supposed to just shut up and don't ask questions. Don't ask questions.
Don't ask the hard questions.
Right.
Don't have the difficult conversations. And basically just be rubber stampers. I can't do that. No. And I've been questioned whether or not should I be on the board. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I am not there to be a rubber. Yep. I'm not there to be a rubber stamper. I'm there to do my research. I am there to share the information that I get, from doing all of this stuff. And I'm there to actually advocate. I've been called activist many times just because I'm asking those hard questions and I'm putting them out in public and being transparent and having that accountability. It's called advocacy. There's a big difference between advocacy and activism. I'm working within the means, the structures that I have. I'm not working outside of it.
Yeah, activism to me is like you're trying to push an agenda where advocacy is standing up for what's right.
What's right. And I'm standing up on our state's constitution, right, to which our state laws are going against. Here's a fun fact, Mark. When our state legislature passes laws, they don't check for constitutionality. They don't check whether those laws are constitutional.
Well, that's a surprise.
Right? So how do we know then? What happens when there are laws or mandates that are being passed that are unconstitutional? They go through the judiciary branch. That's where it goes. It's the judicial branch that interprets the law, and they determine whether a law is constitutional or unconstitutional. Now, yes, the Ninth Circuit is one of the most liberal in the whole nation. You know,
In every state.
in every state, right? Yep. So we've got those three states of Washington, Oregon, and California, right? And there are other states in that circuit, but let's talk about our state. Again, the question comes in then. Even if there are things that are not going to be upheld in our states or our circuits, courts, there's a recourse to that still. Things will go to the Supreme Court. And we'll see that, especially with this Title IX. We will see that because there have been many decisions by our Ninth Circuit based on Idaho's Protect Women's Sports law. They have a state law.
So case law comes
then,
into effect here.
Right. And then that was, so no transgender in women's sports per their state law. But that was in 2020 when that passed. But that was challenged by ACLU. And the Ninth Circuit upheld, you cannot have this law in your state, apply this. And the Supreme Court also agreed to that, shockingly. But where things are moving right now is a couple of things that we need to, think about is that decision was made based on the 14th Amendment, not on Title IX. Not on Title IX. It wouldn't stand a chance on Title IX. I'm not a lawyer, but just by reading our Constitution, by reading the federal laws or reading these court documents, you need to, get the details instead of just the headlines of, well, look at Idaho. They had a state law, and because this is what WIAA is saying to these school boards that are trying to make change happen, to which Lynden is one of them. And they're saying that, look at Idaho, look at Arizona. They had state laws, and those state laws are now enjoined from being applied in their state. And the Supreme Court even held that decision. But mind you, that was based on the 14th Amendment, which is the due process. It says the due process clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution protects people from being deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So it's the equality, right, of application of the law all across. So the Idaho state ban on transgenders, or I don't even want to word it that way, because that state law is to protect and uphold women's sports. Gotcha. That's what it is, but it's being interpreted as something else, that is, again, it's always, when you start going into the subjective part of laws and things, they're not subjective. They're not supposed to be subjective. They're supposed to be objective. Yeah. They're not supposed to be something that's mutable. Absolutely. That something's going to change the next day or next hour. They're not supposed to be that. So what's interesting is that the decision was made based on this, which is the 14th Amendment, but not on Title IX. So we still have, nobody can come in and say that, the Supreme Court has already ruled that, transgenders being banned from playing in girls' sports is against Title IX. That has never happened. I don't think it will happen. You have to have that faith in our Constitution and in the federal law in which that Title IX was made. And what's interesting is this fall, right, November, December, the Supreme Court is actually going to have a hearing on gender affirming care, because half the nation has banned gender affirming care and half the nation is allowing that. And
when we talk about gender affirming care, they're talking about transition surgeries.
Yes,
and
sir.
Hormones,
blockers, puberty blockers, surgeries. So
stuff that basically destroys everything about them.
Yep, these are irreversible procedures. And
this is, by the way, if anyone out there hasn't seen Matt Walsh's "What is a Woman," you have to see this. And you will see in crystal clear, high definition 4K, the lunacy and insanity of these people who are pushing this. I mean, it's a circular reasoning, and it's because these people, I don't know if there's a gene or if it's just a cancer of progressive liberalism. I don't know what it is, but well, quite honestly, if you want to bring it back to the Bible, it's a satanic religion, really.
They're slaves of their minds.
Right. Yeah.
That's what it is.
You do whatever feels right because God doesn't love you, but I do. So, and I'm going to let you do whatever you want. Is it healthy to let your kid roam around the house and touch the stove? No, you smack him on the hand and say, don't do that. Well, that's mean. It causes pain. That temporary pain causes him a whole lot of lifetime of surgeries and pain.
Right.
And that's what this generation right now, and even in the leadership of our liberal institutions, doesn't seem to get. They don't think past that. There's like a wall. They think subjectively, oh, well, you should be able to do whatever you want up until a certain point, but they don't think it through to its conclusion. Well, I want to punch you in the face. Well, that's illegal. Well, what happens when we make it legal someday? Because we get enough people on my side in leadership that can now change that law. You see, and so for me, again, not to get preachy, it comes back to what are God's morals and absolutes.
Right.
God says it's not good to punch people in the face.
Right.
God says it's not good to rip your baby out of the womb, that it is actually a living being, not because I think it's because that's how it was created and that's how it's intended. So that's where I get my objective morality, not subjective.
And also to add on to that, the work that our forefathers have done in this country is they have set up such a good system by setting up the U.S. Constitution.
Oh, it's one of the most brilliant.
Everybody needs to know that. Now, I'm not from here, but I'm trying my best to, this is the country where I'm going to be getting old, probably dying. I don't know at this point.
Right.
But this is our country too, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And we're part of it, and it's part of us, right? And we're eating the salt of this earth.
Which, by the way, and we're now you're of you were born in Philippines, but you're Punjabi.
By blood, I'm Punjabi.
Punjabi, okay.
Yeah.
And
born and brought
here
up.
you are, not born in this country, coming here and appreciating and assimilating. Does that sound familiar? Another podcast I talked about that.
Right.
You're an American. You bought in. You have your culture, I'm sure. You have your cultural things you do within your family and your household. But the rest of it, I mean, you know more about the Constitution than most born and raised Americans do. And that's kind of the point I'm trying to make here is I love those kind of immigrants. Welcome. Come here and appreciate and assimilate. I will back you. I will support you.
America is a melting pot. And I had this, one elderly person. Well, I got many elderly people that are friends with me in Lynden, and these are really good people, good advisors. And I never felt, that they're treating me any indifferently or anything. But there's one thing that they told me, they said, Kush, if ever somebody tells you that, you're not from here or you don't belong here, ask them, where did you come from? Everybody's an immigrant.
Right. These days, practically, yeah.
And it's such a, beautiful culture, generally speaking, when you come here, and this could be somebody coming from another part of the state. If you left the country that you left or the place that you left or the state that you left, right, for XYZ reasons, you don't try to make this new place that you're at right now be like that place that you left because of XYZ reasons.
Right. It makes no sense to, have for example, a worldview and a voting preference that has basically destroyed the community you live in.
Yep.
Then you take that worldview and that voting preference, go to a town that's not like the one you came from, which is exactly what you're saying, and then continue to propagate your worldview and push that on other people and your vote. How long do you think that town or city or community that you're in is going to stay that way? It's not going to take very long. If enough start doing the same thing, it's going to change and be just like what you left. I don't know where that disconnect comes from or why people can't see that. But bring it around full circle, you assimilate. You're an American. You come here, you assimilate to the American culture. You haven't lost your culture.
No.
But you still assimilate, and that is how it was intended.
Yep.
That's how it's really traditionally been. I mean, there's always been racism. There always will be. Sorry, there always will be. There's always going to be assholes. There's always going to be people that, on the other hand too, I think we need to lighten up a little bit. I watch a little more comedy, maybe everybody can make fun of each other a little bit, get over it and have a drink together.
Right.
I mean, sometimes we get so serious. It's like, oh, what do you mean by that? Is that a racist thing? No, I like East Indian food. Anybody can make anything into a racist statement.
You know why? It's one, because these people, going back to your point of, where you come from, and then, you don't change your view. So I'm going to take, for example, my hometown, Lynden. I'm not from Lynden. I wasn't born there. I don't know how the culture was, right? But I do know why I love it. I do know why we moved there. Well, I didn't move. Again, like I said, I'm married, but I'm just going to talk from that point of view. Of you have to remember the why, and then you try to preserve that why. And these people that, are being labeled as conservative or being labeled as narrow-minded or whatever, they're actually the ones who have preserved Lynden and made it the way it is. So if you can't appreciate that, move somewhere else.
Yeah,
that's what I would say.
Nobody's asking you to stay.
Nobody's asking you to stay.
You don't need to have a movie, make a
Right.
movie about it that depicts how racist Lynden is because we want to expose it so we can make change. No, how about just move, go somewhere else.
I don't have many, too many friends in Lynden because I already have my circle and
Sure.
I have my Punjabi friends. So I'm not looking necessarily for friends, and there was that, and I don't really want to touch it at this point, but there was that introductorial part in the trailer where it said Lynden people are nice, but they don't want to make friends. So how does that make someone racist? And racist is a word that just kind of, replaces.
That's lost its meaning these days.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because it's just being indifferent. And honestly, me, my children, like you said, we still hold our different, very different and distinct cultural values that somehow will interconnect with the values that Lynden has, because these are human values and they're just, being strengthened by our faith, by our way of life, ergo agriculture, right? So these are human values. But coming back to the point of indifference, we're always going to be different. You're always going to be different.
Yeah.
Everybody's different from each other. And just the fact that you're branding everything as racist, like maybe you're the problem. Maybe you're the one who's not, accepting of other
Absolutely.
people's indifferences of, well, why isn't this person talking to me? Well, maybe they don't, like I said, maybe they don't want to talk. They're not being snob. They're not being hateful towards you.
They
They're just
followed me around the store. Well, maybe not. Maybe that's just your perception.
perception. Yeah. And we suffer more in our imagination
Oh my
than
gosh.
we do in the
Oh, yeah.
reality. And there comes that thing
We
again
can get
of
stuck in our heads
it's
real
always
easy.
here.
Yeah.
And that's where again, when you're selfish and you're always here and this whole agenda of things that are happening where
That's
the
selfish.
truth,
That's a good
it
point.
is selfish.
That is a good point.
Because you're making the truth relative according to what you feel, what you want, right? Instead of what is the greater good? What is
Right.
what is the truth
Right.
really? How does it serve everyone?
Well, let
But-
me ask you on that. I mean, I have to imagine on some level you've experienced racism.
More in Bellingham than Lynden, just so you know.
Interesting. Yeah, well, not much I can say about that. But it's interesting to me that how, I guess I'm assuming that you chalk it up as there's ignorant assholes out there.
That's it. It just ends right
Not
there.
everybody's like that.
No.
No. Have I said racist things? I'm sure some people would think very much so. Have I said racist jokes? Usually because I'm repeating it from my black friend or my Mexican friend who told it to me in the first place. Again, it goes back to one thing we need to do too is lighten up a little bit.
Right.
Just
And if
lighten
you
up.
think that people of color don't talk about white people,
Oh my gosh. I've heard the mayonnaise
you
and
are
the
wrong.
white yolk and white bread, whatever. I mean, I've heard yogurt man. I mean, I think they're funny, actually. I'm like, that's pretty good. That's pretty funny. I don't get offended by it. I'm like, you can call me yogurt man or mayonnaise boy.
We just have inherent differences. Then again, this is
Sure.
going to draw back into that boys and girls, a topic that we had initially started. We just have inherent differences, and we need to settle it there. That's it. Don't try to make everybody the same. Don't try to make everybody, into that, put into that same category. You're different. We're as unique as our thumbprints are. Nobody's
Absolutely.
thumbprints are going to be the same. That's nature. That's divine law. We are all different. And leave it at there. You can't, some people are going to be like.
But my ancestors were slaves. So you owe me reparations, excuse me. That's what they say,
No,
I'm owed now because my great grandfather was a slave. It's like, well, okay. Has anybody enslaved you? As far as I can see, you're got the same opportunities as everyone else. You are actually pretty popular. You're class president, perhaps valedictorian, like the gal in the movie. I don't know. She looks pretty normal American privilege to me. I don't.
No, you can't go in the past. You can't keep going in the past. So if there's one thing that faith, my spirituality has taught me, is you have to live in the present.
Amen.
You can't go back and change the past, but you can definitely change the future, and that is through your own actions. You have to be what you want to see in the world, and that's not going to happen if you start saying you're wrong, because your ancestors did this to my ancestors. That's not how you're going to make change happen. Now, today, if you ask me, as our faith is Sikhism, we still face, even being in USA and Canada, if we speak against our government, if we say, this is our faith and we're practicing it fully, right? As everybody has that right here. But we, as Sikh, today are still targets of assassination from our own government. And where we come from, if we keep crying and saying, we're victims, and this is where you're going to say, Kush, sometimes, you have too much fire. It's because it's in our blood. That's just how it comes. You won't have your Independence Day today had your forefathers not fought for it yesterday.
That's right.
You wouldn't have that.
That's right.
So you have to be thankful that somebody laid their lives, somebody, was not selfish, somebody thought of the greater good, and somebody, was there for everybody, not just a certain group. And that's why you have your Independence Day today.
I couldn't have said it any better. That's an excellent analogy. And I bet you there's probably too many Americans that couldn't even articulate that as well as you did, that were born and raised here, because they're spoiled. And they're, as you said, selfish. We're a selfish generation, very selfish. It's all self. It's like I say with, my conservative Christian worldview is it's like spokes on a wheel, and God's in the center, my worldview, my values. And then there's work, there's, school, there's politics, there's, whatever. They're all connected to back to God, and
that's your foundation,
right?
You have to have a foundation,
right. And the more liberal side of that, it's all a bunch of disjointed boxes that don't touch. And if anything, there's broken lines that go to them, and then in the center is self.
Again,
which is
you're
why
a slave of mind. That's where it comes to spiritually talking. Is if you don't think everything is connected. If you think that how you feel is how your truth is going to be, which means nowadays the truth is relative, right? And it can be anything.
Exactly.
You're wrong.
That's because
If those
boxes are different.
Right. if
I'm
the
not
sun,
in that box right now, therefore it has nothing to do with this. Oh, actually,
right.
yeah, it does. It's directly
No,
connected.
that's the divine law. That's the law of God. And if there's anything that you see outside, if the sun says, well, I'm going to orbit on my own thing, and the moon says, well, I'm going to do my own way, and they become selfish,
That's a
or
good
God
point.
becomes selfish and say, I'm not in the mood today, right? I'm going to be subjective today. Just think about how things are, So right now, spiritually and divine law speaking, we're going against everything that God stands for. And now we say, well, my God is different from your God. And I have, my God doesn't say this, doesn't say that, or I don't have any God because God is relative and he's just something made up.
Well, the whole, I mean, and again, I hate to get political, but y'all know me. The whole Democratic platform, for the most part, is literally against every 10 commandment. You can sleep with your neighbor's wife. Just be kind. Just don't tell him. Just don't get caught. You can, whatever. You can abort your child that God created and knew before the beginning of time in your womb. No big deal. You were a male, but you know what? You want to sleep with other males? That's fine. You don't even want to be a male? Whack it off and become a female. I mean, I could go down the list of things that, another one is, well, we have to create programs and taxation that help the poor. Okay. Well, Jesus didn't said give to the poor through government. He said basically in context to do it out of the goodness of your heart in obedience to him, not government mandate. Because when you have government mandate, now you abrogate our responsibility to give out of the goodness of our heart. You just took that away from me. Now I'm compelled to give by the government. What do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to give a lot less charitably now because the government's taking it from me. That's not at all what Jesus said.
Isn't that something now? The hypocrisy is when they say that church and government is separate. Isn't this now the church, the government trying to meddle into
in the church? Well,
right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've heard that through liberal politicians who use that as a means to get, policies pushed through for higher taxation and programs for all these people that, I know black people that look at stuff like the NAACP and stuff like that and just go, I don't need that. I can do it on my own. I don't need you to tell me I can't do it.
Right.
I'm not good enough. And Uncle Sam needs to step in and help me.
So 2021, when the floods came, right? We had Nooksack, Sumas, Everson, right? And Lynden stepped in to help big time. And Lynden doesn't have opportunity council.
Wait,
Lynden,
how much did Bellingham step in?
Here's where Lynden did what it did, and that's where the government and, like you said, Bellingham didn't come in. Lynden doesn't have opportunity council. Lynden doesn't have is it called Lighthouse Mission? Lynden doesn't have any of those nonprofit. Oh, the list is very long in Bellingham, right? Of all of those nonprofits, Lynden doesn't have any of that. Lynden had their churches, and those churches opened up their doors, for food, shelter, right? For all of the needs of these communities.
Right.
Look at that. That wasn't government.
No.
That was not something that the government mandated us to do. So like you said, we're fully capable of doing it without the government's interference.
The government is there to make sure that our borders stay safe and that commerce is done within, basically to kind of keep things functioning, All right, we have some tax dollars, of course, that need to go to building roads, things like that, keeping the infrastructure going. Government should not be meddling in, race issues, gender issues. I don't care what you want to do. You want to go get a surgery? Go for it. But don't litigate or, legislate that I have to, with my tax dollars, pay for part of that.
Right.
And, or your abortion. I should never, ever, ever have to in any way, shape, or form, at my tax dollars whatsoever, pay for your abortion, and Planned Parenthood is a government funded agency. You know, these are the kind of things that if you're at least a truth seeking, honest, classical liberal, most of them will at least say, yeah, okay, that's a good point. But we have this. I mean, you look at guys that used to be considered liberal, like Joe Rogan talks about this. He goes, I don't know, Liberal Party left me. I don't even recognize it anymore.
Yeah.
You know, you got people like Brandy Cruz that was with Q13 News, who's more of a blue dog classical liberal, but definitely a liberal, who now looks like a conservative next to today's, you know, state, you know, Washington state liberals.
Right.
So I think that
It's the overdoing of everything. So there is value in some of the work that the Democratic Party has done.
Sure.
For me, I don't believe in either party because they're all one.
Oh, well, that's true. That is a good point.
At the end
Same
of the
bird,
day,
different wings.
right. Same bird,
Exactly.
different wings.
Amen.
Yeah. And
Amen.
and we shouldn't forget that, you know, even though politically we might not, you know, agree on some of those things
Sure.
with our neighbor, they're still going to be your neighbor. They're still going to be that person that's going to come to your aid first before anybody else.
We'd certainly hope
Right.
so.
So with that mentality, you know, I think that there are certain things that the Democratic Party has done, you
Sure.
know, with pretty good stuff, but it's the overdoing of it right now.
Right.
Always overdoing. It's always tipping that scales. So there has to be a point where you say it's enough.
Yeah.
And now coming back to gender affirming care, the Supreme Court is going to hear, you know, start hearing that this fall, November or December, and that's going to have very consequential, you know, decision that's going to affect the whole
Everything.
nation, because 26 states have banned gender affirming care, and like you said, it's the hormone, it's the therapies, you know, the
Transitional
puberty,
surgeries.
surgeries, you know, that's the big one. So that actually what they're going to be deciding on is
That makes me curious to if this goes in favor of it, let's say, of these things, what does that do to the insurance companies? Now they have to pay for transgender surgeries? You know? I mean, that's the kind of thing that if I'm an insurance company, and this isn't something that we deem necessary surgery, what if they say, well, it is because it has to deal with their mental health and they could possibly commit suicide if they don't have this surgery? Now the government has just legislated that insurance companies, which we all pay for and pay into, if you have medical insurance or you pay for medical insurance, are now paying for it. And if it's state insurance, still our tax dollars paying for it. So now I'm paying for your transgender surgery that ultimately in the end, statistically, leads to more suicides than any other segment of society, because you're telling your brain and your body that will two different things that will never ever coalesce. They will never get along. You will always be at war with yourself, even though there's some spot in your mind that makes you think that though I'm a boy, I really want to be a girl. Your body and your brain ain't going to get along.
So this, you know, the consequential results for this case, why I say it's consequential is because remember I just talked to you about Idaho state law and how the Ninth Circuit and the Supreme Court did upheld that their ruling is A-okay based on the 14th Amendment, which is the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution. Now, this one that's coming in November, December, it's going to affect even that. How? Because this case, the question in this case is whether Tennessee's law banning gender-affirming hormone therapies for transgender minors violate the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution. That's what it's in question, is does it violate the Equal Protection Clause? And within that, what's going to happen is, what's going to come to question is gender identity a protected class? And if gender identity is a protected class, this is something that is immutable. It's something that can change the next day. I'm a boy today, but tomorrow I might be a girl.
Absolutely.
Right? So how is law going to navigate against that? Because so far, right, our protected classes are immutable. even though faith is something that one can change, but it's not something that you will change
Right.
every day or
Right.
something like that. You know, that's I guess faith doesn't come under the equal
Sure.
protection clause. That's different. But the question would be, and this is consequential because the decisions so far that are being made have been made on the equal protection clause of the U.S. Constitution. And question is sex the same as gender identity as far as protected class is concerned? That's why it's going to be consequential.
That's going to roll around in court, I think, for a long time.
Well, yes, it may be something that may take a year, but also it may be something that may take only a month. Why? Because the question that is being posed is because I'm not allowed to play in the girls' sports, but you've not been banned to play in the boys' sports. You have that opportunity. That's what they're crying right now. I don't know. English is not my first language, so I don't know what's the saying would be for like crying out lies. But that's what it is. It's saying that I identify as a female and I'm not being allowed. I'm being banned from playing into girls' sports, and I am being treated now differently. And under the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause, that I am, that I deserve, that I deserve the protection under that. But then again, that's your perception of your being treated indifferently.
So now so what you're saying essentially then is we're litigating protection of your perception.
Right.
We're
That's
protecting your perception.
Right. And that's it's because it's the fairness. Justice is basically different from fairness, because fairness will come into your perception of what is fair to you, versus justice is something, that's going to apply to all.
But I perceive myself and identify as the owner of your bank account and your car. So you should start writing checks and hand me your keys.
Well, those kind
Oh,
of,
Mark, that's absurd, right?
that absurdity is going to be questioned, and that absurdity is going to be dealt with and decided by the Supreme Court pretty soon.
Which is why
that's what we're waiting for as well. And school boards, be it city council, be it the county council, I'm not just talking about school board here. It's every elected official. If you think that you can't do justice to your role because you want to keep the peace, you want to be move with strategy. I don't know how you're going to do that if your whole house is on fire. How you're going to move with strategy when you have a situation like that. So it's to every elected official out there that if you can't do justice to your role, don't be a placeholder. If you are going to be a rubber stamper where you're waiting for things to come your way and you're not doing your responsibility of looking into what is this? What is being presented to me? Which organization did this come from? What kind of influence did it have? Or, hey, this is something that I should have, or we should have done as a board, as a council, but here we are, somebody else is writing our policies without our input in it, that, that the state law does vest in us that authority. You should be questioning, okay, what's happening then?
So in other words, do your job instead of just passing the buck, or what they call,
there you go,
another term, kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, I can't put it, more perfectly than that. And again, I just want to reiterate again and again that kind of messaging is for every elected official.
Absolutely.
I'm not going here, talking.
School boards are no less important than our state government. In fact, even more so, because they're the ones that are they're in it. They see what's going on.
Right. And we have a lot of things, like I said, the school boards have broad discretionary powers that have been transferred over or taken over or being trampled on. And we need to reclaim that power back. That's my only messaging. And that's why I have that fire in me. And when I say that I'm here for my children, only a fool would say that you're here for your two children. In our culture, when we say our children, my children, it means everybody's children.
Sure.
Children is not something that you divide. Children are children.
Absolutely. Which I would right there make the point that when people tell me, well, it's not your kid, and if you don't like it, just don't, ignore it. an example of that was be when they have, transgender story time at the local library, or, transgender dance twerking out in front of a taxpayer funded school with children involved.
You pay into that. People
Well,
don't realize that
yeah.
you pay for when you receive your property taxes, two portions of it. 30% or so is going to go to state education funds. So you can go to any school board, actually, into any state. And if they tell you you don't live here and you can't comment, you pay for that.
Well, and I had somebody say to me, well, as far as the transgender story time, well, if you don't like it, don't bring your kid. Well, but it goes back to your point that it's not just my kid, it's other kids. That's abuse. That
Right.
is sexual abuse at that age to a child.
You're
And
burdening
so
them with something that
you-
they can't carry.
yeah, they're not developed. Of course, they don't know who they are yet. And you have to give them it's your job as a parent to guide them to be who they are as they were born, not who you want them to be because you have a mental illness and shouldn't
Right.
have a kid in the first place. And so, to say, well, don't bring your kid or just don't worry, it's not your problem, it's not your kid. If my neighbor is being abusive to one of their kids, and I hear it next door, I'm going to call the cops. I'm going to do something about it. I'm just
Right.
going to go, well, it's
Not
not,
my
my kid. And that's the thing that I want to establish is this is abuse. It's abuse. It's abusive to your child to sexualize them at those early ages. I'm sorry, if before they're like 12 years old and reaching puberty, they shouldn't have any of that crap.
Right.
Showing them that men and women are different and there's a sperm and an egg and this is how babies are made. Again, I don't know that they need to know that even at 8, 9, 10 years old. They can know that when they're 11, 12 and starting to, develop themselves and understand things a little better. But they're sexualizing children at, kindergarten.
And that's probably why we are becoming a third world country as of now. We're supposed to be the leader. We're supposed to lead, but this is where we're at. And, this thing about when to introduce certain topics to your children, you ask any person of any culture and they're going to tell you, keep your nose out of it. And you're going to ask any other normal family, whether or not, they're from a different culture, they're also going to tell you that you keep your nose out of it. That's our family's decision as a family, which is the basic unit of society, to decide, right, when and where we're supposed to be having this kind of conversation with our children. That's our rights as a parent, which again is being enroached.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, I would say that with that, having absolute moral law, knowing that, little Janie was a little girl and, maybe she's a bit of a tomboy, what we call a tomboy here, which means she likes more boy stuff. That doesn't mean she needs to start getting hormone blockers and
No.
preparing for transition.
Right.
She's just more of a tomboy, and so I know lots of girls like that are very feminine now that when they were younger, were out there beating up the boys.
Right.
And so
I'm one of
nowadays,
those.
right. Okay.
I am one of those.
Yeah, you get it. So nowadays it's like, oh, well, we should look into hormone blockers because, and my mind just explodes because like you said, it is making us a third world country.
Yep.
And, that ties into something else you said about everybody still seems to want to come here. But yet there's so many people that bash on America, traditional America. They bash on traditional America, the way it's been for their, up until I'd say at least about 20 years ago, it was still
Right.
somewhat, 2000 hit and I don't know, everything just went sideways. It just sort of just seemed to go downhill from there.
Right.
But if America's so bad, why are you here? Just like if Lynden is so bad, why are you here? And don't come to a town that has a culture and expect to change it because you
No.
have a different worldview.
No.
Go be with the people.
Just so you know, we don't do that. We don't think like that. And this is where I'm in shock because people that I've experienced indifference from, they're going to love your culture for, now I'm going to take, for example, like, colorful clothing
Yeah.
or dancing. But as soon as they get to know that we're patriarchal, we're not perfect.
Patriotic.
Patriarchal.
Okay.
Like our
Structure-wise.
Structure-wise, yes. Men are.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, patriarchal that way. As soon as they get to know that we
then
are
the feminists step in. I
right,
don't like
that we're a patriarchal, community, patriarchal culture. They don't like that anymore. As soon as they get to know that we're very conservative, from the way we wear our clothes, right, all the way to, many other stuff, they don't like that part. So you don't get to pick and choose what you like with our culture. And just like that with the town, you don't get to pick and choose what you like with a town. It's going to come with whatever it comes with, and you take it.
Right.
Right.
Amen.
And that's what they're doing with diversity. So me being this person of color and coming from a very diverse background, most of them are just going to brush me off because I'm conservative in my way of life. And I'm not even saying that politically, just in my way of life, that I'm very conservative than most conservatives. And it's that hypocrisy and irony of, wow, you talk about diversity, but then you want to nitpick, what makes me diverse, and then just appreciate the parts that agree with you. That's not love. That's not inclusion. That is not accepting diversity. It's not that. I come with everything, right, that my culture has given me, that my parents have given me, my faith has given me. They can be good, they can be bad. Nobody is perfect. No community is perfect. No culture is perfect. No person is perfect.
Correct.
But when it comes to inclusion, you can't nitpick what you want. That's what I see is Kush, you're great, but then you shouldn't be that conservative.
They want to put you in a box.
Yes.
I want to put you in a box.
Unfortunately,
You're a woman, therefore you should be a feminist. You're East Indian, so therefore you should be offended by anything that's American. It's just this weird circular reasoning.
Right.
And
and again, it's selfish.
Yeah, because
you say you're going to be loving, but you don't, and some people may use it the other way of, like you said, if let's say, if let's say my child would say that, oh, I'm a girl, but I want to be a boy, and I'm just going to accept it as it is. I'm not doing the right thing.
Do you feel like you're abrogating your responsibility to be a good parent?
Right.
You're not doing
Thank you.
as a parent, which is to guide them through life,
and
not
it's hard
confuse
to do that.
them even further.
Right. It's hard to do that. It's just like somebody when somebody is on the road, they don't have GPS, and they ask you what the directions are. You're gonna be selfish if for no reason, if you're gonna tell them, yeah, keep going on this road, and that's the wrong path, but you still you don't guide them to the right path, and that's being selfish right there. It's like
Well,
why do I care?
I might do that if they're
care.
moving from Bellingham and they want directions to Lynden. I'll probably just say, yeah, it's about 50 miles north of the border. Just go through the border and yeah. Anyway,
It's kind of the same thing. You don't, love is not easy. It's everything nowadays. Everybody's very soft.
Well, and
everybody's like easy, and nobody wants it the hard way. And oh my god,
it's not always nice.
No, it's not.
They
nice.
say, and these are the two words that catch. And I hear this from obviously, a certain political bent all the time. We need to be kind.
No,
we need to be nice.
Not everything is going to be kindness.
You want to talk about subjective.
Right.
Instead of objective.
And that's my point.
Kindness is subjective.
That's my point.
Because
I don't want to
when
be
I'm
subjective.
telling my son, hey, knock it off because I know that something he's doing is going to hurt him, that doesn't come across to him as kindness. In fact, he goes, you're not being kind. That's like the whole Democrat Party. You conservatives are not being kind. No, we're just telling you that chopping off little Johnny's yaya when he's, 7 years old, is going to destroy everything he is, not make him who he's supposedly supposed to be. It's not us not being kind. We're actually being empathetic because we're concerned. We don't want to see children get destroyed.
And gender affirming care is not scientifically accurate.
It's a nice catchphrase that puts a polish on butchering your child.
Right. There we go. It's all about changing and using words and to, just to justify what you're doing.
Same thing with abortion. It's a woman's right to health care. It's a woman's right to choose. It's a woman's body. Well, it's infanticide. Oh, no, it's a woman's right. They got to change the meaning of the words. That's the first thing you have to do. You
Always.
have to change the meaning of the words.
Always.
Because we can't have derogatory meanings for the things that we want to do.
And that's why I'm a wordsmith.
Absolutely. Me too. I try to be. I mean, I'm not very good at it, but
I always will look at what the possible intent, the content, and what is this policy's, what is it in theory right now in front of me, and how it's going to be in practice.
yeah.
That's how you think as an elected, person, because
That's what it should be.
it's not, I'm not there for the title. I'm there because so many people have trusted me for who I am, which I wrote in the voters pamphlet very clearly who I am. And I'm very straightforward. I wasn't nice. I didn't say things like, please vote for me or whatever. I just said, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm sticking actually to that. I said that I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to do what I say, which means I will have integrity, even if it's the hard thing to do, even if it means that I'm going to stand alone. And again, I'm not degrading my other, fellow board members on my board or in the county or anywhere else. I'm just talking about myself, because the thing is, people just interpret things their way and they get offended just because you're standing up on your ground. So I was very straightforward, and I'm going to be the same person. I can grow, I can mature, but that's not going to change my principles. And that's what I wrote out there. And that's the beauty of being transparent, is the electorate, your voters, even though these are people that are not going to vote for you, they know exactly who you are, so they know whether or not to vote for you.
Well,
so I'm doing justice even to them by saying who I exactly am. Because if you think that I cannot use nice words and kind words and, be all buttery and all of that, I can do that.
Well, you can be kind and still get your point across in a very assertive way. But unfortunately, if your point of view
nowadays is like I said, everybody's soft. And even nowadays, everybody think that,
they get their feelings hurt so easily.
Right. And that's not going to fly, or something. So.
But because if you're assertive about something, that often means that you're an a-hole, because you're assertive. It's like, I mean, maybe my delivery wasn't quite as soft as you would like it.
Right.
But,
Does that change the content?
Exactly. It's just like if I say,
Does it change the point?
If I say, you're a big jerk. Or if I say, you're a big jerk. Right? So what's the content there? I still think you're a jerk. I'm just saying a little more nicely. It's like, you're a big jerk. You really are.
So that's the thing. It's like, we need to, sure, there's some balance to, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not perfect. But you try to balance out, what you want to say. I don't know.
I know what I want to ask you, and we kind of touched on it, but just a little bit real quick, and that's the whole DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, which basically, in my opinion, is as racist as you can get. You can't get any more racist than that. It means you are of color, therefore you, company A, you need to interview X amount of these people and hire them because of their color.
I wish.
How does that make you feel as a woman of color, though?
Insulting, because you're hiring me because of my skin color. That's actually racism right there. On the basis of race is how you're hiring me. So that's already discrimination on the basis of race.
Yeah, so that's not inclusion. They just excluded you. They set you aside and said, here you are on this pedestal by yourself because of your skin color, and we're going to make these people hire you. How is that?
I would rather be hired on my qualities than my color. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't change. Well, it contributes to who I am, but it's not going to change who I am, if that makes sense. I am who I am. it's not going to change because, and like I said, I'm very diverse culturally because I was born and brought up in the Philippines, so I'm a Filipino by heart. But by blood, I'm Punjabi, and I know both of my histories.
Yeah, it's pretty diverse.
Where I come from, But that's the thing. I'm not appealing to the people of, like on the other side, or maybe moderate. I don't know. It's because I'm very firm about my convictions, dude. That we're gonna lose our history.
We're
Books,
losing it already.
right?
It's
History books are being rewritten. And
definitions are being changed in the dictionary.
Definitions are being changed. Words are being interpreted, according to an agenda. Yes, there is an agenda, and the truth is now relative, and everything is based on how you feel it instead of, having that moral compass of, and like I said, at the core of it, even though we have different religions, trust me, there's a lot of similarities in our values and at the core of what our faith teaches us.
Oh,
even though we're different, because like I said, I was brought up as a Catholic as well in the Philippines. School,
interesting.
Our school, it was a requirement for our school, and our parents weren't really that strict about, we're not going to get them baptized, or we're not going to get them their first communion or first confirmation. We had all of that. So I'm very appreciative of, having the best of both worlds, or many worlds actually, and living through that and knowing that God is, you can't, just put him into this one definition,
right?
Because he's limitless, he's shapeless, timeless, a lot of things. Because when you remember God, you don't say, oh, he looks like Mark, or maybe he's a man.
Well, I hope he's a
woman.
heck of a lot better looking than I am.
So it doesn't come into, our perception. When you limit God like that, it's because of you're limited.
You are, amen.
Not him.
Yeah. So in closing, why don't you kind of break down real briefly just some bullet points on what exactly, what are the options and the recourse that the school board has to mitigate this whole transgender issue?
Sure. So just to say that one school board can't do anything. This has to be, a more organized effort where everybody has to do their part. So that's where, my message to elected leaders, doesn't matter whether you're in city, school board, or the county council, or even as the representative, whether or not you have the majority, even if you're in the minority, you have this moral obligation to say the truth, to uphold our Constitution, both the United States and our state constitution, and also the federal laws and on Title IX. So some of the recourses that we have is we've got 295 school districts across Washington, and not all of them are members, but there is a pretty good number out of that are members of WIAA, and that's how the student athletes play, get to the state championship and whatnot. So that's all under WIAA. One option, and that's going to be big. This is the most that's going to make the most impact and stance, really, is to take WIAA out of the question. So we don't renew our contract with them next year, and unfortunately that means that our students won't be able to play sports with other schools who are a member of WIAA unless they're not as well. Then we take that power back to us, because we as school board have that power to control, regulate, and supervise athletic activities. Then we can make our own policies. That's a really big step that will need the community support, and that's not something that school boards will just do on a whim.
Oh yeah, especially with Lynden being a huge sports town.
So that's where it comes with the question of what does matter more to you? Is it continuing in sports, or really standing up for the right thing? So personally, if I am asked, I would say I would sacrifice this much today so that I don't have to sacrifice everything tomorrow.
Absolutely, because if you follow it through to its conclusion, where it's going now rapidly,
right?
I mean, we're gonna have Farmer John's gonna say, "Look, my goat identifies as a track star, so I'm gonna run my goat in the next track meet."
Exactly.
I mean, that's absurd.
No. It will happen. It will happen. It will happen. I tell you, I guarantee you that it will happen. People are going to start having their pets identify as athletes because, now we're if we are not standing up and leaving it up to the parents, then it's going to happen at one of those meets.
I guarantee you, my golden retriever can outrun your daughter.
Of course. So that's one thing that we can do. The second is what a Lynden School Board and Eastmont School District has done is the WIAA amendment, which means basically submitting an amendment form to their current policy that is enabling transgender athletes, or I would just say boys and girls sports, simple as that. And that will get voted on by their assembly, and then it will come up to whether or not WIAA will want to, uphold whatever that decision will come out. Let's say, the voting takes place and says, I don't know, there's a bunch of different amendments that were submitted. So last year there was energy, but nothing really happened. There wasn't an amendment specifically on this gender identity participation policy that was submitted. But this year we have been successful to do that. And even though I don't want to take any credit or toot, my own trumpet, but I've put energy into this since June and have been pushing it to, school board directors across the state. And that's exactly how at least we got, 2 to submit and 20 to support them. So, and our school superintendent has done a good job, of following that process through. Again, just going back, my only problem was how the appeals was worded, because the appeals was worded to say biological males, right, can play in girls' sports. That was my issue with that one. So third option would be to have board resolutions all across the state, all across the 295 school districts. Board resolutions are just stands of the board, and just in writing, and it gets filed away in our own drawers. But passing those resolutions and submitting it to our legislators and actually having the number, how many have passed that will have an impact out of the 295 school districts that we have. Fourth would be letters to legislators to basically say that we need to uphold Title IX. We need to uphold our own state Constitution, which is based on Title IX, so no discrimination on the basis of sex. That's what it says. And we need to uphold that because our state laws and OSPI is going against those two things. Fifth would be once the Supreme Court rules that gender identity is not a protected class, then that will have a big impact on our state laws. Now, it may come a time where our state will, again, ignore right, what is the right thing legally, and then they're not going to encourage us to follow it. That's where the boards and the community need to kind of step in and say, well, we're going to fight the state because this is what the federal law is saying, and it has been upheld in the Supreme Court, right? And then that's once it comes to that part, so that we're waiting on that one. It will happen at one point for sure. And then sixth would be OSPI is interpreting the law, or RCWs, which is our state law, in a very ambiguous, in a very problematic way. And we need to stand up to that. So we as school boards, and we've done that, just so you know, but other school boards across the state need to come in and say, OSPI, we do not agree with your interpretation of law. This is where the legal, your school attorney comes in, your district attorney comes in, and this is where that legal part comes in, that you have, you don't have the legal authority to be issuing rules and guidelines that are of illegal or impermissible legal authority. So we need to start questioning that, because there are rules and guidelines coming from the OSPI that have violated APA. They just put it out there without any kind of proceeding.
And
so
what's
they just slapped
APA?
it. APA is Administrative Procedure Act.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you make a rule, an agency like OSPI, they need to go through a process, just like the legislation does, public comment and whatnot. So the recent guidelines and rules on bathrooms and locker rooms, it's not the law. It's OSPI's interpretation of the law that is forcing schools to allow biological males into girls' bathrooms and locker rooms. It's OSPI. So the law only says that we cannot discriminate on the basis of sex, on the basis of race or gender identity. But it's not saying, the law is not explicitly saying that you need to allow biological males in girls' bathroom. The exact reason why we have boys and girls and it's not deemed discriminatory, one needs to question, why is it then discriminatory if we, ask a biological male to actually just don't use the girls' bathroom? Contradicting stuff that needs to get sorted out, through the legal means of that. And that's where we shouldn't be afraid of lawsuits.
Absolutely. And just good old fashioned common sense. You put a biological boy, I'm sorry, there's still going to be testosterone and urges in a girl's locker room. I've already heard, I can post up all kinds of incidences of girls complaining about these biological boys coming into their locker rooms and being in a sexual way. So they're not really identifying as a female. They're identifying as a male because they're acting out on it. Then you get into this whole weird, well, maybe they're identifying as a lesbian. Okay, now you're just getting off the rails. It's just absurd. And we have allowed it.
Right.
We have allowed it by being asleep, by not wanting to rock the boat, by not, like you said,
complacency.
Speaking up, complacency. And it is going to destroy not only our children, but this nation. And Kush, I thank you so much for your hard work, your willingness to volunteer, well-researched, your wealth of knowledge. You don't really get paid to do this. It's a labor of love. And quite frankly, you are a patriot. And I'm so glad you are in this country. We need more people like you. And folks, there is stuff you can do. She just laid some of it out. And one of the things you can do that's most important is pay attention to what's going on in our schools, support our school board members, pay attention to them and what they're doing as well. And if at all possible, volunteer and take part yourself in your community. And that's the only way we're going to take back our schools from this, what I call progressive onslaught of just insanity. So, Kush, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Mark.
Appreciate it. And
thank you all.
Well, that's all for today, folks. Thanks for watching the Urban Outcast, and we will see you again next time.